good day to the matriculants. We are going to be looking at the preparation for our paper 2, which is English Home Language. And therefore, we're going to be putting all the components together this afternoon to try and refresh on what we must be knowing in preparation for the exam. One of the demanding qualities of this paper is that we have poems that we did individually and at a slower pace through the course of the year, but we have to now put them together and know all of them in preparation for the exam. Please remember, do not target which poem will come. Any poem is able to come into the exam, and as such you must know all your poems by now. All the same, we are going to touch on qualities that we need to remember and traits and characteristics of the poems and what we touch on when it comes to those poems, our novels and our play. So as such, it means that we have to focus on looking at the poems, a breakdown of what we need to know. I will start with Sonnet 130, which is a poem that we brought from grade 11, if you remember. And as such, one of the confusing elements that we struggled with learners is the issue of the satire. So I'm going to touch on the issue of the satire because it's always been confused. One of the things when we need to know is that what is satiric about the poem and where is the mockery? Because we will get answers that the Shakespeare mocks the mistress. We must understand that the mockery is based on his fellow typical poet writers, and as such, the mockery is not directed at the mistress. So that's something that we worry about, and therefore we need you to internalize and understand. What are we focusing on when it comes to Sonnet 130? I'm going to touch on the structure. The structure is very important. It is a sonnet. So if it's a sonnet, we must be able to understand that when talking about sonnets, we are talking about a specific structure in mind. We have a Shakespearean sonnet that is 14 lines. Divided into two parts. We have an octave, which is line 1 to 12, and we have a rhyming couplet, which is line 13 to 14. Our octave is divided into 3 quatrains. So that's something that we must put together so that you can be able to align your content with the structure. Structure and content have a relationship. In line 1 to 12, whereby we call it the octave, he deals with different qualities of the mistress that he divides into different quatrains. For example, quatrain number 1 is line 1 to 4, whereby he deals with the mistress's eyes, the lips, the breasts, and the hair. So this is what we mean when we're talking about quatrains. Quatrains deals with specific characteristics of the mistress's features. But you move on and say in line 5 to 8, he deals with the cheeks, which is the cheeks of the mistress, the breath of the mistress, and as such, that's when you now are aligning the features. In line 10 to 12 deals with this. So you must be able to align your content and say the structure deals with this part, and therefore it means that this is what is happening. Line 13 to 14 is introduced by the volta and yet. So when you say introduced by the volta and yet, we must be able to align to say, and yet brings a change in the content. If it brings a change in the content, we must be able to align ourselves to say, the mistress's physical features are cancelled out by the rhyming couplets because he loves the mistress for who she is, and therefore it has nothing to do with the physical features. He makes beauty internal and it's not external. So what does it do? Despite the mistress's unappealing physical features, he loves the mistress for who she is. So this is what we focus on when coming into the structure of the poem, and therefore we must be able to understand what it means. Now, when we're coming to the sonnet, the structure, the mood, the tone, the imagery must be internalized, because we must be able to know negative similes are used. My mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun is a what we call a negative comparison. So when we're coming in and talking about identify the figure of speech, you must be able to know and understand that that is what we call a negative simile in line 1, and therefore compares the mistress's eyes to the sun, and therefore effectively what does it do? His mistress's eyes are dull. They are not as bright and beautiful as the sun. That's the meaning of the metaphor. So this is what you should be able to internalize, to say, identify the figures of speech. When we're talking about the tone, we should be talking about the mocking tone, the teasing, playful, heart in cheek. We should be talking about blunt. So that's what we mean now when talking about the tone. When we're talking about satire again, when we say satirizes the use of extreme praise, when we say her breath reeks, he's not satirizing the mistress's breath, but he's satirizing the conventional use of extreme praise by the typical poet writers. So now this is what we mean when we're talking about be very specific when answering when it comes to Sonnet 130, and know exactly the function of line 1 to 12, the content of line 1 to 12, the tone of line 1 to 12, the figures of speech of line 1 to 12, and then the change that is brought by line 13 and 14, the honesty that is in line 13 and 14, the true love, the adoration, and as such, that's when you are now putting the sonnet together. As such, when we're talking about this part, Shakespeare uses negative comparisons to describe the uniqueness and beauty of his loved one. He does not need to exaggerate her looks. She is perfect to him, although he does seem critical and rude in the first 12 lines, as we say, blunt. The reader realizes that he is, in fact, sincere in his love for his mistress. And that's where now we're saying in the rhyming couplet, what does he do? He declares by heaven, he thinks his love is rare and valuable. He does not need, the key word is unrealistic comparisons, to declare his genuine love. Those are our key words today. In being so brutally honest, he has ironically given her a heightened beauty, simply because he does not dote on her outward appearance. The love is based on the internal beauty and not on the external beauty. So this is what we are coming into when talking about the cliches used by the typical love poets that he cancels out and mocks or satirizes. So that's why we had to be very specific of what you focus on when it comes to these sonnets, Shakespearean Sonnet 130. So now we are looking at the impact of the external versus the internal, and therefore you must be able to separate exactly, and it is separated because of the content, remember, which is separated by the structure of the poem itself. It is a link, a beautiful link that you must create together. The structure is dividing the mood, the tone, the content, and you must be able to give that. All right, let's go to our next poem. Our next poem that we're going to be talking about is The Child Who Was Shot Dead by Soldiers at Nyang.